What's up, family? I hope you are all having a wonderful day. I am back for another video. I have just a few thoughts on my mind that I want to share. So, this one is what would it take for me to believe in God again? Because this is a conversation that I am starting to get into a lot more. More people are wondering, what would it take? What would it take? What does God have to do to prove to you that he exists, right? What will it take for you to believe in God again, to worship him again? And so I'm gonna unpack that a little bit for you in this conversation, and I'm gonna do it as genuinely as I can. Now before we jump into this, if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the alert notification bell, consider joining our community, consider volunteering, and check out our merch. You can do any of those things through the links in the description below. Oh yeah, and by the way, guess what? In 2 weeks, I'm gonna be in Palo Alto. This will be my first time being off of the East Coast, really. So it'll be my first time on the West Coast, and I'll be there doing some work for a secular community. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, and I have some other announcements, but I'll make those. I'll save those, right? Oh, and of course, if you're watching this video, you know, today, join me on Skeptic Haven tonight. All right, so. What would it take for me to believe in God again? That's the question. And see, here's the thing. Everybody that asks me this question doesn't understand that this is a loaded question. You're not asking me to just do one thing, and I get that sometimes they don't see that because most people do not want to wrestle with or believe that their reason for belief for them was a jump. That you actually did not go through any type of proper way of knowing to get to this conclusion. In most cases, as I've shared plenty of times, that it is cultural. Even when some people will say it's emotional, and I argue against that only somewhat to say that it can't be emotional until it's cultural first, because your emotions have to be pre-programmed or programmed rather to respond a certain way, and so those things have to be already a part of your socialization. And so most of us doesn't don't realize that we were socialized to believe these things. And I'm not even trying to say it in a way where there's a hidden man behind the curtain, or there's some great conspiracy, or just some great theme. But the big point is we have socialized each other. We socialize our children towards certain tendencies, and so we've been socialized to have these beliefs. We do not have these beliefs because we verified them. And that's typically how I treat people, especially when we're having this conversation. Is that, hey, I get that you believe this with your whole heart, but the one thing I know for a fact is that you didn't follow any process of verification to get to this belief, which I've talked about in another video of just kind of dissecting a little bit why we believe and how we believe. And I'll share a little bit more on that. So let's deal with this loaded questions. That 3 minutes is long enough of an intro. Um, there are quite a few things that you're asking me to believe in, and while there was a time that I didn't know any better and would have made that jump with you, that time has passed, and I'd like to outline some of the things you're asking me to skip past in what some believe would be me returning back to God. So just pray hard enough, and God will reveal Himself to you. See, now here's the thing that will work for you. That would no longer be sufficient for me. Oh, not even in the least bit. If I pray and then God says I am God, that's not enough for me to believe in you to the point of worship. There are a whole lot more questions on the ground that have to be satisfied before I could jump to that conclusion. And just a little sidetrack here, because honestly, My worship is a little more valuable than that. I value myself. I value my integrity. I value who I am. I value my morality. So I'm not just going to worship, or for a better, let's use a better word than worship. I'm not going to give honor to anything where honor is not due. I am not one of those silly kids who you can just say, oh, this person is important, they deserve your honor. It doesn't work like that for me. It did before. Because the same way that I honored God and worshiped God was the same way that I honored people and worshiped people who also had no good reason to be honored. And I'm not saying that there aren't some honorable people out there. I've met quite a few, as a matter of fact. But I am saying that that's not automatic. You're not just you're not just getting that from me because of anything you've done. So when you just pray, and then God will reveal Himself, that will not work for me. Just read the scripture and you'll have peace. That will not work for me. Just pray for an encounter with God and then you will have an encounter. That will not work for me. None of those things will work for me at all, because none of those things are proof that this God does exist and that it is the exact God that you believe that exists. So let's kind of unpack this. The first thing you're asking me to return to believing in is a supernatural being. You're asking me to believe that there is something that exists outside of nature. And while, yes, there possibly could be, I have no evidence of such a thing. I have no reason to believe in such a thing. See, and that's the thing. It's not just a lack of evidence, it's also a lack of reason, or sometimes I can say lack of utility. How useful is this belief? I lived for 28 years not just believing, but committing myself to this belief in a very real way. It didn't benefit me very much. Left the belief alone for over a decade now, and my life is being transformed. Now, I'm not saying that atheism is a recipe for success by a long shot, but for me, it definitely did allow me to make some drastic improvements with my life, because critical thinking is likely a good pathway to success. So I have no. It's not just that I don't have an evidence that there is a God. I really don't have any reason. The only reason, and you see this even with the Christians in my comments, the only reasons that I see people actually have are based in fear. And I'm just no longer a child. I'm not afraid of things that I don't have evidence for. Again, it's a weird loop that you want, that I tell you I don't believe this because I don't have evidence for it, or I don't have a reason to believe in it, and you say, well, you should believe it, because if you don't, then it's going to happen to you. Well, it seems that you've put the cart before the horse, because if I don't believe it, I'm not concerned about it happening to me. I don't believe it. The only way I could attach concern to that, which again is another issue with Pascal's wager, sorry, it exists in this place where you ignore reality. And I'm not that person, so I can't attach concern with concern with going to hell, or concern to be being burned by fire, or concern with breaking this alleged creator's heart, who I do not have any evidence for his existence. I don't have any real quantifiable relationship with this person, and everybody that I have relationships with, those relationships are quantifiable. And if we're all created in the image of this character, then so slippery slope. I have absolutely no reason to believe in a supernatural being. That me believing that does nothing to impact my life. You see, and I think that's the biggest thing that people that I think people don't really wrestle with. You can believe all day long, but doesn't change your life. That believing that God heals, doesn't hold God accountable to healing. And so if believing that God heals doesn't hold God accountable to healing, then how does believing that God sends people to hell hold God accountable to sending people to hell? again, it's like I've mentioned before. If he couldn't manage heaven and he couldn't manage earth, what would make you think that this character could manage hell? And the best answer for this is this character, we have no substantive reason to believe in this character. So I have no reason to believe in anything supernatural. And if there was something supernatural, then by definition, I wouldn't be able to interact with it, which would mean that it's absolutely irrelevant to my life as a human being and has no utility to help improve life in any shape, form, or fashion. The second thing you're requiring me to believe is a belief that this being created Earth. Do you see that? You're not just asking me to believe in a God. If that was the belief, if that was the thing, if that's what religion promoted, then sure, we can just say, sure, I believe in a God. Because that definition is so damn loose, it can be generically anything. Technically, when whoever's using the Neuralink might be the next classification of God, because when people define these things, it isn't definitive. It's something vague, like there must be a higher power. Well, sure, I can believe in a higher power. The sun is more powerful than I am. It may not be an active entity. I can't say for sure that it is or it isn't, but it is definitely more powerful than I am. There are quite a few people on this planet who are more powerful than I am. Whether you're talking politically, whether you're talking professionally, whether you're talking economically. So just believing in a higher power, what the hell does that even mean? Right? And so just saying what you believe in a God, no, when you're asking me to believe in a God, you're asking me to believe in a specific God. No one has asked me to just believe in a generic God. Well, nobody except for Oprah, maybe. She Oprah seems to believe in a generic God, but but yeah, so you're asking me to believe that not only that there is this supernatural being, but then you're also asking me to believe that this supernatural being created a natural earth. This is a problem for me. Now, and I get while it may not be a problem for some, it is definitely a problem for me because we often say that the reason we cannot hear God or we cannot see God is because God is not natural, but God is spiritual. Well, here's the thing: the earth is natural. So if God can't speak, because he's not natural, if God cannot make himself visibly seen because he's not natural, then how the hell is he able to create a natural earth or the natural people in it? See that you can only assume truth here. You cannot conclude truth here. You can only just believe this because you want to believe it. The dots don't connect. And it would require me to believe in a created earth. Which is so funny. The only thing the Bible says is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right? Doesn't say how. So how someone builds an entire doctrine of saying, "Oh yeah, I know God did it. I just don't know how He did it." You would not accept that as a credible statement under any other circumstances. And that's the problem. We let this God character get away with so many horrendous things, which would not be bad if people didn't believe in it. But because people do believe in it, then when we let this God character get away with these things, that means we're authorizing people to get away with these things as well. All right. This also man. So yeah, I don't believe that a God created the earth. Actually, I have a controversial thought. I don't believe in creation. Period. I personally, this is one of the reasons I don't necessarily call myself a content creator. I don't like the idea of creation. Um, in the sense that people say, "Oh, I created this. I created this," and it's like, no, you didn't create anything, as in making something from nothing. That's not what you did. That is a mystery that we're still trying to solve. What you actually did is something much more complex, much more profound, and much more fascinating. What you're doing is generating, which means you are taking the things that exist and kind of remaking them, if you will, into something new, which I find even more beautiful. There is no art that is created just by the artist. The art is a result of that artist experience in real life and the things that artist has been exposed to. So I don't like the word create, not just for theological reasons. I don't like the word create for sociological reasons. I think it actually separates us from what's actually happening. You're not creating anything, you're generating. And that's beautiful. Anyway, that's not this conversation. But if you're interested, holler at me. That is something that I train people on. I don't call myself a motivational speaker or anything like that because, I believe in motivation. Motivation is good and all of that. But I think what most people need is just help with their mindset, help thinking things through. And so that's what I do. I help people think. But anyway, so then there's also you're requiring me to believe that this being created all life and especially humanity in its own image, which I'll bring up the same issue before. Again, if this God cannot interact with nature, how is this God interacting with nature to create nature? That's it's like the Terminator loop. The Terminator comes back to kill John Connor, and they send the other guy back. I think his name was Kyle to save Sarah Connor. So she can give birth to John Connor, but then Kyle becomes no, doesn't make sense. It's a loop. It's a loop. Now, and the sad thing is that will likely make sense before this will, because we're anyway, we live there, and I actually am a very pro science guy, kind of controversial there too, not just for climate science and other things like that, but technology. I am absolutely excited about technology. I'm not a technology doomer. I am a technology realist though now, so I'm not excited and like, oh, nothing will go wrong. I'm kind of a realist in everything I do. But let's continue. So this requires my belief in created humans, and there is absolutely nothing. I have absolutely no evidence and no reason to believe that humans were created. All right, there's so many reasons that we already know the Genesis story doesn't work, and I think one of the saddest things about it is once you realize that Jewish cultures never really took the Genesis story as literal. This is somewhat of a Christian fiction here, because all cultures have written about the origin of things. None of them have taken it so seriously as Christians and Muslims tend to. So it is very interesting. But no, humans are born. I've never seen a human created. And if such a thing is to ever to happen, it will likely be in our future, nowhere in our past. I mean, that's just the best way I can say that. And for people who say, well, you have no evidence for evolution either. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Have you seen the development of a human being? I mean, like, have you seen the fetal development of a human being? And you're going to tell me that there's no evidence for evolution. I don't know why people don't bring up the what is it? The ontogeny, I think that's what it's called. I don't know why people don't bring up the argument of ontogeny more so in the case of um evolution and seeing it in today's terms, because you see it in every form of life. You see, or at least the evidence of it, that kind of mirror of it in everything. So I have more evidence for other things than I do this thing that I have absolutely no evidence for, and again, no reason to believe. All right. So now, if I did believe this, I'd have to believe that there was a time that God could stand face to face with humanity and has chosen not to do that for over 7,000 years, if you're a young earth creationist, and for over, well, forever, if you're the rest of us. you know and so either way, there's nothing that logically places me there. Now, if God was out here talking to everybody in the cool of the day, like he did with Adam and like he did with Enoch, if he was out here showing everybody his hind parts like he did with Moses, then okay, there's more evidence, and there still wouldn't be reason. Why would this God require my belief? And why would other people who believe in this God feel the need for me to believe in that God as well, in order for them to be codified in their belief? Well, that's a sociological red flag of how you know that the people themselves do not believe in this as well. They're just not safe to ask questions yet. And they're telling you you're not safe to ask questions either. So what they're doing to you is a sociological side effect of their own socialization. They're saying you're doing something that I'm not supposed to do, and so I have to stop you from doing it, because the more you do this, it shakes up what I thought about the world. It's like a Truman Show thing going on. Yeah, I wanted to. Okay, so this is getting long. Let me bring this in. Um, it also requires my belief that this being is infallible, or that this being is perfect. And maybe you've heard me say before, I have no reason to believe in anything called perfection. I actually believe perfection is just as mythological as a lot of other things. That this idea of perfection is just as superstitious, for a lot of reasons. Number one, it is highly subjective. The idea of perfection is highly subjective, and which is why people can convince themselves that a God who drowns the world, including babies, is perfect, because you are allowing yourself to acknowledge the subjectivity of perfection, which means this is something that is clearly, obviously wrong, but you're saying, I choose to see it as perfect, which is something that people do every day. You're with somebody who is unattractive to everybody else, and maybe even a little bit unattractive to you, but then you choose to look at them and see perfection, because perfection is subjective. And so a belief in an infallible an infallible creator tells me nothing. It does nothing for me. Like this if you can say this creator is perfect, but I can't judge that creator by its perfection, because you're going to give a reason as to why it doesn't have to meet other standards of perfection, then you know that it is subjective and ultimately a futile defense. All right. And that this being requires my belief that this being is all powerful and all good. So again, you're not just asking me to believe in a God. You're asking me to believe in this particular God who is supernatural, who did create the earth, who did create humans, who is perfect in all of his ways, who is powerful and all good. And this belief requires me to ignore suffering, or it requires me to justify suffering with another unfounded belief, unsubstantiated belief. So you present the unsubstantiated belief that no, God is all powerful and all good. And then I say, okay, if God is all powerful and all good, how is it that we have so many people dying, suffering, and all those things? Well, then you say, well, God is all powerful, but he chooses not to use his all power because he made humans with free will. Well, apparently, it's not just humans that he made with free will. Apparently, everything that exists has this God given free will, which then again, what is the utility of all powerfulness if it's not useful? All powerful can't save your creation from natural disasters. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, it makes no sense. So here's the thing. In order to get me there, you'd first have to demonstrate that there's evidence for anything being all powerful and all good, not just your God. We'd have to find evidence for this at all, for this to even be a characteristic that we could attach to something. I have no evidence for the characteristic. Even when I was in the faith, the word holy used to bother me, because the more and more I started trying to define the word, I'm like, hold up, this doesn't mean anything. This doesn't mean anything of any utility, of any irrelevance. And then of course the last thing that you're asking me to attach myself to believing is that a being who kills indiscriminately is worthy of praise, respect, and honor. That requires me to separate myself from my own humanity. So with that being said, there is nothing that would lead me back. That clock has run out, and the historical evidence, once we are willing to engage it critically, is more than enough to conclude the conversation on the existence, relevance, or necessity of this particular God. So I just wanted to let you know that's a battle that you might as well not even invest your time in. I'm not going back. I'm moving ahead. That's it. It's godless from here on out for me. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate y'all hanging out with me. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider joining one of our membership communities, consider volunteering to help us with the membership communities, and consider checking out our merch. That's all I have for you now. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful. I don't know why I like saying that, but I do. So do what you do. Holla at you.